The Voyage by Matt Clark. Read by Brad Glenn. I dare not look. I cannot. Forsaken. I am forsaken. I know not if any soul, living or otherwise, shall read this, but the act of writing grounds me, pulling my mind away from the dark and back to the receded light of reason. Our voyage started like any other, with a fine ship, proven crew, a good manifest, and an honest captain. The sun shone from a spring sky as this schooner left port and headed for open water. Spirits were high, grog was glugged, shanties were sung. Dembski, the navigator, he loved a good shanty with a voice to match. But perhaps if he had known that a particularly exceptional conquest he had plundered was actually the local theatre owner's daughter, he would have been more subtle and gentlemanly about the whole affair. Mayhap he could have gone on to great things on the theatre stage, had that path not been angrily denied him. It certainly is now. Things first began to unravel when Corcoran's internal humours waxed out of balance, the captain coughing up bloody sputum and leaving him vulnerable to a particularly grim strain of the flux. The course we had charted was a considerable distance over the depths, and by the time we reached our first destination, our leader was delirious with fever. Dismay increased when members of the crew heard our resident sawbones, Mac, coughing vigorously in private. Old Mackie ordered himself and Captain Corcoran off the ship and into the port's infirmary. I can only hope that they recovered. The company, so recently under new management, saw fit to replace our lost officers with commendable speed, and with all haste we set sail to no loss of schedule. The new fellows, Captain Ocon and Dr. Cut, were a queer sort, sallow-skinned and quiet of voice both. We presumed, not openly, that they hailed from a far land not oft frequented. Dembski, ever the wag, toasted the doctor's surname as a means of welcome to great mirth from the rest of the crew, but there was nary a twitch of a smile from neither newcomer, who both went on to prefer their own company to ours. To Dr. Cut's credit, when Taj, the cabin and watchboy, was struck into near delirium by a rogue flying fish about the skull, he fixed up a poultice to treat the bruise and supplied a most peculiar concoction for the injured boy to sup. Taj told us that it tasted absolutely vile, but fortunately put him right quick enough. Curiously, the ship's cat, never really one to draw attention to itself, took an immense and obvious dislike to the new captain on sight. Our moods began to sour a few days later when we found the wretched beast at the stern one morning, lifeless, of a broken neck. We said a prayer and tossed the body over the aft rail, a forlorn sacrifice to the deep. The following night, one of our riggers vanished. Master Rigger Surlington had taken the watch that night, as per the lot pulled by the first mate. Searles was no stranger to the duty. After all, we were experienced sailors all, and it was a running joke that First Mate Bork frequently rigged the draw to distance Surlington from the rest of the crew, as Searles was aptly named and a rotten curmudgeon. While the man was privy-mouthed and prone to hitting his cups angrily at every opportunity, he was one of us regardless. Thus, when Dobbs went to relieve him of his post and found no trace, we were all deeply concerned as to his fate. A search of our modest schooner, excluding the locked cabin of the captain and surgeon's bay, was not forthcoming with clues, and we uneasily went back to our duties. Then the rain started. A light shower at first, filling the air with an unusually musty scent. We carried on as usual. After all, we had experienced worse, and who can change the weather? By that evening, the weather had shifted from moist but clement to a constant downpour. The sky was a gloomy firmament that soaked everything. Bork petitioned the captain, through his locked door, to allow us some grog for our spirits, and was successful. The night passed without incident. We sang in our cups. However, the cheer rang false to these ears. The morning brought a fresh strangeness. As the dark broke to a stale grey, the watchman, maybe Tadge or Waterby, I forget which, awoke me, and together we fetched a hungover first mate Bork from his bunk, with hushed talk of bodies in the water. Together we pulled on our oilskins and investigated this strange claim. We made haste, for a person overboard was no small matter for even a crew larger than our original 16 souls. And while we hurried, with our heads bowed against the ongoing downpour, Tadge, it was definitely he, explained that, at first light, such that it was, his eye had been caught by a dark shape below the water to starboard. As he had shielded his eyes from the ever-present deluge, peering at the submerged shadow, his ear detected a bump and a scratching sound against the hull, faint over the sound of the rain. Leaning over the rail, the boy had espied two objects floating against the hull, hazy, humanoid shapes made indistinct by raindrop and foam, with pale hands grasping at the wooden planks. The frantic boy insisted that they were two of our crew, Smythe and his close friend Lorenzo, previously thought slumbering in their bunks, now scrabbling for their very lives in the cold, merciless sea. We reached the gunwale and bent over it, holding on tightly, looking for any sign of life, myself peering afore, the others peering aft. I thought I glimpsed something, a pale face screaming up at us amid white foam, the mouth a gaping black smear and a dark hole where one eye could have been, for Smythe indeed had a single eye with an oft-mocked patch over where the other once dwelled. But even as I hollered for my companions to look hence, the face slowly sank below and out of sight. Of the shadow, there was no sign. I stared at Bork and Tadge for a moment, seeing bewilderment and horror respectively, then tore from the rail, running as fast as was safe back to the crew cabin. The men had heard my shouting from the deck and were up, reaching for garments in varying states of preparedness when I burst in. I barged past protesting fellows, heedless to the water deposited upon them from my soaked oilskin. I made my way towards the back of the cabin where Smythe and Lorenzo bunked, and lo! There they were, both looking confused in the extreme. We recounted events as best we could, and, ever the joker, Waterby muttered something and Adamski laughed. The laughter immediately ceased when there was a number of thumps from the deck above us, followed by a faint splash. Tadge and one of a brotherly pair, Hutch, gladly remained behind to keep an eye upon the two men thought lost while the rest of the crew rushed outside to investigate. Upon the aft deck we found some strange breed of seaweed scattered in a trail of odious clear slime being rapidly washed from the deck by the unholy downpour. A panicked cry pulled us back to the crew quarters with great haste, but when we arrived there our 4 shipmates were gone. The glass in a porthole was smashed from inside, but there was no way any grown man would have passed through that gap intact. With 5 men missing, our complement of souls was down by almost a third. The first mate and I, shaken by the disappearance of our men and the apparent portent that foreshadowed that scene, confronted the captain, insisting that the situation would become untenable if we lost any more men. There were mutterings among the crew of curses and devils, that the vessel was trapped in purgatory and other even more outlandish claims. Captain Ocon listened intently and insisted that we would stick to our present course, claiming that we would make for the next inhabitable land sighted. I requested that we unlock the weapons locker to distribute pistols and our 2 rifles among the crew for defence, but the captain denied this, however, stating that an armed and jumpy crew made for a dangerous situation. The men were not happy with this news, but were placated for now, at least. We all pulled extra shifts for the next 2 days to keep the ship on schedule, and Hooch, the rum-inclined brother of the missing Hutch, refused to sleep, alternating between deck duty and time in the rigging, where he insisted he could watch for land or a sign of his missing brother. On the 3rd day of his vigil, Hooch sighted land. Adamski thought this odd and consulted the charts with the captain and first mate, for the large island some distance off the port bow was not on any map. Captain Ocon looked most pleased and made good on his word to investigate this isle for supplies, and perhaps to create a beacon on its flat central peak for assistance, and dwell there until the now torrential precipitation had passed. The men were more than happy to leave the cursed ship at any rate and make for dry land. We weighed anchor, and Captain Ocon, First Mate Bork, Joker Waterby, Shifty Quates, Wise Cheng, Ademski and Dobbs lowered the skiff, rowing with eager haste to the presumed safety of dry land. I have stayed on board to guard and maintain the ship as best able. Hooch remained also, refusing to leave the ship, fearing that he would not be present should Hutch return. I glimpsed whatever rats had been breeding in the hold, fleeing the ship through the scupper drains in the deck. At this dubious sign, and since Ocon had finally distributed the firearms among the crew for their foray, myself and Hooch took the last 2 pistols for ourselves. The crew did not return that night, but something did. I heard the same scratching against the hull while I lay in my bunk in an exhausted stupor, the battering rain and frequent patrols of the ship taking their toll. While slumbering, I had dreamed of a half-serpentine, half-almost humanoid creature, all teeth, wicked talons and hateful eyes. I lit a storm lantern, peered outside and called out to Hooch, instructing him to come down so that we could secure the crew quarters. I tried to get him to safety. I swear I did. Please do not presume that I locked him out and left him to his fate as I have been left to mine. Time passes strangely indoors under this infernal rain. I cannot measure how long I have been in here, how long it has been since I heard Hooch whimper and fire a single shot. I cannot tell if it was for something predatory or himself. The mind plays tricks after a while. I have fancied that I have heard chanting at the edge of my hearing. The persistent downfall is penetrating the decking now. There are rivulets of stinking water running down the walls. The hold is awash, the supplies spoiling. I have to trust that the ship will not flood. I cannot sleep. Whenever I close my eyes, I can hear Ademski singing chanties to me, but his voice always takes on a guttural, burbling tone before fading to a wet, mocking laugh. My powder is wet, my pistol useless. I dare not look. I am forsaken. I have just a marlinspike to defend with. I fear it will not be enough. The rain is an everlasting, relentless grey, unending. Help me. The rain. Unending. The rain.